This video is a continuation from the previous. So value and tonal contrast have to do with the relationship of black, white, and gray in a work of art. And black, white, and gray allow us to see three-dimensionally. So essentially, value produces tonal contrast in a color composition, and it also provides depth, meaning 3 dimensions. And you can see from the image below that is purely black and white what that looks like. Now, if you create a composition that is purely black and purely white, that is the highest form of tonal contrast that you can have. And so it's very, very popping to the eye. Here you see that the shades are much more gray than black or white, and so then it creates a little more softer feel to the that's a photograph. I was going to see if it was a drawing, because the bottom looks like a drawing, but that lightning is definitely a photograph. Okay, so achromatic means grays that are mixed from black and white that don't contain any color. Chromatic are shades of grays that contain color. So you can see an image here of across the top, it's just black and white. There's no color added at all. Well, there's not supposed to be. It looks a little blue to me, but it could just be my screen. And then the one in the middle has green added to it. So by adding a little bit of green in addition to the black or the white, you get a chromatic gray. And in that case, that's kind of a warmer French gray. Then the ones on the bottom are bluish. So grays don't just come in one shade of gray. There isn't just, one scale of gray. There are a lot of different shades of gray, depending on how you mix them and how much color you mix with them. So you can see how we're starting to add up all these different colors that we have. Value contrast is the degrees of difference between the shades of gray. And just a couple of visuals here to show you what that looks like. A high value contrast will provide a very sharpness and a clarity that is easy to read. Low value contrast creates a more muted palette, and there are some examples here for you to explore as well. So low key means middle gray to black, and high key means middle gray to white. And so you can see that you get different moods on low key versus high key. So low key tends to be darker, more mellow. Whereas high key, like it suggests, high key, keyed up, right, is more quiet and stimulating. And here are some examples of high key versus low key and the mood that those impart. And so it works the same when you're picking a color palette. Is the room, like, let's talk about this. Is a bedroom something that you want to be high key or low key, right? Is a kitchen something you want to be high key or low key, right? So the activity in the room does have an impact, and that's why we're talking about tonal value. Highlights and cast shadows. So highlights are where the light hits the object. So if you look at an apple, you get that little spot of white on it. That's where the light has hit the apple. Cast shadows are when the shadow that you have is elongated from very strong highlighting. So black, white, and gray can be used for design purposes, narratives or symbolism, or evoking an emotional response. If you haven't yet been exposed to Pablo Picasso's Guernica, and this is a massive painting, it's huge. It was very controversial at the time, and we'll get into it actually when we get into controversial art. But it is painted in black and white, and it evoked a very emotional response in its time. So now y'all have to either look it up or stick around till we get to that lecture to find out more. So here's something that shows, we talk about principles and elements of design. You can see in this photo, the red strictly on the girl's coat creates that focal point. It creates that emphasis that we've discussed numerous times. This is a beautiful application of it. It's the red door. But in this case, it's also applied to film. And one of the reasons I show you guys more than just buildings is because there's more than just buildings to architecture. Architecture has uses the same elements and principles, but also other types of art are housed inside buildings. And so it's really important to look at the way principles and elements are played on other areas of fine art and to be able to use those sometimes to inspire the work and the color palettes and the schemes and other things that we do. So colors are created by mixing them. The manual blending of pigments is called admixing. It means you're actually mixing them by hand. However, some color is done by the eye of the viewer, and that is known as optical color mixing. So here's where this comes into application in our area. You've picked the brick for the house. Now you got to pick a grout color, and that grout color will change the brick color. And that is optical color mixing. And so you can look at a house that is red brick with gray, silver, light silver grout next to one that has a dark brown grout. And from a far enough distance, those look like completely different shades of brick. And so that's optical color mixing. And so we just, as humans, we tend to just, our eye blends things together. It fills in those gaps, as we have talked about before. And so that's really interesting, the pointillism, right? You get very, very close to it and it makes no sense. But as you back off, you start to see things. And that is something you have to think about in patterns and textures that you apply to a large surface on the outside of a building. Because if you get far enough away from it and the eye starts to blend things, it can make or break the locations of your patterning and your materials and your texture. And, Chuck Close with his dots, that as you move further away, you begin to see things. And, the face is the first thing that we see, even if it's not there. So you'll hear stories about, rain coming through and the efflorescence breaking out on the outside of a concrete building. And that's just the chemicals leaching to the surface as the rain passes through because concrete's porous. And people will start to see things in it, right? I think the last one that I heard was the Virgin Mary was seen on the side of the building. And that's what our eyes do. If there's a face to be seen, we're going to find it. But it can also work against you if that's not what you're trying to do. So you always want to make sure you get that large view away from what you're working on and the patterns and the textures you're picking to make sure you like that effect both up close and from far away. Okay, so color and the principles of design. So color can function in a number of ways. It can bring emphasis to specific areas. When you look at this painting, or this photograph, where does your eye go? That's emphasis. Yellow is creating an emphasis. So here it's working as leading lines and moving the eye around different parts of the composition. So it can be used to move eyes around the composition. It can create balance between elements. We have green grass, yellow grass, blue, and then we have that little pop of red that helps balance out the different elements. It can also create a 3D illusion. Obviously, that is just an optical illusion. That's not there. But just think about how you can really create these cool optical illusions if you're working with tile patterns. And you can make, I worked for, I did a lot of commercial architecture. And I worked for a company that Cisco Systems was one of our clients. And the woman who was laying out the floor in the break room had a small space to work with. But she did something really cool like this with the VCT, which is vinyl composition tile, to create this interesting three-dimensional feel to the tile. So instead of a break room being boring, you can play with color and pattern inexpensively to get really interesting design. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get good design. In fact, it's said that the best designers can design on a shoestring budget. And I will tell you that for most of my career, I did have to learn to design on a shoestring budget because clients would often say, if it looks expensive, then that defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do. And they didn't want it to look like they had built the Taj Mahal. They wanted to look like they were considerate of the money that they were, taxpayer money, because I often did municipal work and educational buildings. And they wanted to be considerate of the taxpayers' funding, and not build anything too elaborate. So we always worked with a lot with minimalism. But color is a really great way to make something look rich and expensive without spending money. When I was young, color paint cost more than white paint, but not anymore. It's roughly the same. So you can use any color you want. And it's the same price as if you just paint the walls white. Okay, let me stop here and we'll pick up with color theory in the next video.